Hello, my name is Dr. Paul Cottrell. I'm recording this on July 18th, and I want to talk about the semiconductor industry and how it is changing and how it may affect the overall broad market, like the S&P 500 or Russell. 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, all right? So let's talk about one of the big chip makers, NVIDIA. Now, NVIDIA has been, for year to date, been starting to decline since May. Okay? Here's the chart for NVIDIA, and you can see that it's been going down here. And that's been happening since May. Now, why is that important? NVIDIA has a lot of contracts to the hyperscalers, the ones that are building out these servers for AI. Now, who are the major customers for the hyperscalers? The server, the ones that are owning the servers and the ones that own the property for the servers, own the land. So you have companies like Blackstone that own, I think it's Blackstone. I always get BlackRock and Blackstone confused. I think it's Blackstone. So Blackstone owns real estate and has built out these buildings and hooked up energy to them and have leases to companies that will maintain and buy servers. And these servers have these chips, and these chips are really important to do this computation for AI, artificial intelligence. NVIDIA is a major supplier of these chips. So a lot of these server farms that are coming online have NVIDIA in them. And so NVIDIA has these contracts where these companies will install these servers, run the server, and they will pay a lease to Blackstone. So that's one flow of this whole build-out. Another flow is that the actual server company has contracts with OpenAI and Anthropic and others to run the models, to build the frontier model, to run and maintain the model, and to do the querying. The problem comes in is that the money flowing in to OpenAI and Anthropic is less than the money flowing out. The cost to run the models and the queries costs more than the money that they're making. Now, the thought is that, well, let's just keep on increasing the cost. But in the news, we just recently heard that companies are getting fed up with the higher cost of the tokens and they're blowing their budgets, so they are rational. They're rationing their tokens. They're de-tokenizing. Then there's talk about maybe building a local model for the companies, do computation locally, and not have to worry about OpenAI or Anthropic. In addition, when you're running your business and your AI agents on a system like OpenAI or Anthropic, they can see what you're doing. So loss of IP, intellectual property. So it's not sustainable. The point here is it's not sustainable. There's circular financing that's taking place where OpenAI makes a contract with Oracle, and that if OpenAI doesn't pay, Oracle doesn't get their money. But Oracle took out a lot of debt, and it's backed by Larry Ellison privately. So if OpenAI decides that they can't IPO, can't get other funding from private equity companies or venture capital companies, there won't be any money to pay Oracle, and therefore the whole thing starts to unravel. And if the hyperscalers aren't getting paid, why would they buy more chips from NVIDIA? So the smart money has already determined that NVIDIA chips, the actual demand for them are most likely going to go down in the near term. That's why NVIDIA is starting to sell off, on top of other chip makers catching up and other companies making their own chips, like Apple. So, with that, NVIDIA is starting to sell down. The semiconductors are starting to sell down. Let's just take a look at tech. I like the tech ETF. If you're longing tech, take a look at TECL. It's a 3 times leveraged ETF. And you get a similar pattern. It peaked for a year to date. It peaked June 2nd. And it's starting to sell off. Now let's take a look at semiconductors, because tech is tech, and semiconductors is a little bit more tied to the hardware. Year to date, for longing the semiconductor industry with an ETF SOXL. This is to long the semiconductor industry. So if it was going good, it would be going up. What do we have? A similar pattern. It's starting to sell off. And the peak was June 22nd. So NVIDIA started to sell off, then tech started to sell off, and then now semiconductors is starting to sell off. What's happening is that there's a slow deflating of the AI bubble. But it's not called the burst. It's not going to be a burst. It's really a slow deflating of the bubble. And smart money is moving out of the Mag 7 and the semiconductor industry, on top of the news that's coming from China that they're building out more effective models and making their own chips. So there's competition from China. So the semiconductor industry is starting to sell off. The tech industry is starting to sell off. NVIDIA is starting to sell off. Oracle is having a problem. Microsoft's having a problem. So the suing from Apple with OpenAI, so there's conflict that's happening. A lot of people are rumoring that Microsoft may sue OpenAI. So the reasons being is inability to actually have their models perform the way it's supposed to. But that's rumor. So, but the point here is that there's infighting that's taking place. There's circular financing. And there is this movement of investor class slowly moving out of the semiconductor industry. And this has been happening since June. And the rotation out of NVIDIA happened in May. It is happening. It's slowly happening. So things are starting to deflate. But we haven't heard the big news yet. Like NVIDIA can't get financing. NVIDIA defaults on an agreement with a hyperscaler. Or Oracle defaults on a debt. Something like that would really shake the markets. So this movement that's happening, and the bad news about the semiconductor industry, is starting to put pressure on the S&P 500, and it's pushing down. Now, I still have a year-end target for the S&P 500 at 7,800. I said 7,800 to 8,000. But after looking deeper into the semiconductor industry, I'm having that target at 7,800. And it could be as much as 7,600. So I'm readjusting for year-end for the S&P 500 anywhere from 7,600 to 7,800. I don't think it's going to hit the 8,000 because of this issue. Now, what's interesting is what's happening with the energy sector starting to go back up because of the war in the Middle East. So this war in the Middle East is presenting itself as some cover for institutional investors to slowly get out of the semiconductor industry and move into treasuries or move into more defensive equities. As this movement is taking place, there's going to be some sell-off that's happening in the S&P 500, some rebalancing, and then it should start marching up. So we may see a 7,400, 7,300 S&P 500 before it starts marching back up to 7,600 or 7,800. I don't think by year end it's going to get to 8,000 because of this tech issue. Now, what I'm going to do is tactically, if there's a big sell-off in the S&P 500, short the S&P 500. And then if it gets to those support levels, and I will go over the details of that in a different video, then tactically long the S&P 500. And then also positions where I'm shorting the semiconductor industry and the tech industry. And the ETFs that I'm looking at to short the semiconductor industry, I'm going to keep on shorting the semiconductor industry even if the S&P 500 is going up. TECS is an ETF for shorting the tech industry. And also SOXS. So TECS and SOXS to short. And I'm also looking at USD, which is an ETF, not for currency. USD, which is a long for semiconductors, and the short for that positioning would be SSG. So I recommend if you want to short semiconductors, look at SSG, look at SOXS, and to short the tech industry, TECS. Now, if you want to short NVIDIA, do NVD. All right, so those are the ETFs that I'm looking at to short. But sometimes you may see a position where someone comes on the news networks and it kind of pumps up the market, and it's kind of a dead cat bounce. These stocks in the industry will go down. But what will happen is they'll go down and then retrace a little bit and then come down even further and then retrace a little bit and come down. So as it's coming down, you want to short the tech industry or the semiconductor industry or NVIDIA. But beware of these retracements before it comes back down. If you want to play the tactical move, you want to long it and then close the position and short again. So that's the reason why you may want, during the sell-off, if you really want to pay attention to the market, you can capitalize on the retracement. But if you want to be just a little bit safer, just keep on shorting the semiconductor industry. Then as individuals, as the sell-off happens and money is rebalanced, then the S&P 500 will start to stabilize and then start to march back up. So at the very beginning of this, shorting the S&P 500 and shorting the semiconductor industry may be prudent. Then things start to stabilize for the S&P 500, but the semiconductor industry keeps on going down. Now, it's an important feature here that a bulk of the returns the last 2 years for the S&P 500 have been in the Mag 7. But this year, it's non-existent. And we're at about 8% return or so, somewhere in there for the S&P 500. I haven't looked exactly what the number is, but it's around 8%. It would have been 12, 15, 20% if the Mag 7 was doing better, but they're not, and people are moving out of it. So it's not dragging down the market as bad. So this is the reason why I'm saying that the bubble is going to burst, but it's really not bursting, it's really deflating. And that the contribution of the Mag 7 with the S&P 500 is much less in terms of the actual return that we currently have on S&P 500 relative to 2024 or 2025. But you can tactically short the whole industry or certain companies. And I think this is the time to do it. I think this is the time to do it. Okay. What I want to do is play a video that shows you what I mean by this retracing.
Websites your competitors don't want you to know, part two.
All you do is go to this website, and it lets you find out exactly how much your competitors are making.
Okay.
I'm going to start there for the benefit.
Now, this is Bloomberg, and this is Ives, that he dresses like a clown, all right? And he's been pushing the AI gravy train for a long time. And he had a fund and series of investors, and then all of a sudden he decided to partner up with a bank, taking almost a marketing analytic role. Well, wait a minute, you had a fund that was managing people's money. You were the boss, and then all of a sudden you're merging with another entity and diluting your power. Now, why? This just happened. Now, think about what's been happening with the semiconductor industry. The semiconductor industry started to sell off. When? June. When did NVIDIA start to sell off? And Oracle, we're talking May. He had cash flow problems. He had investors, I suspect that he had cash flow problems, and he had investors that wanted to pull out of his fund. And so to keep on promoting the narrative in hopes that things are going to get better, he's partnering up with another company and has diluted his power as an owner. Why would you do that? And if the things are so great, the same issue. Why would people sell you gold if it's so precious? So he's found a safe haven with another entity while the semiconductor industry and the AI industry is starting to fall off the cliff. But he will continue to pump up the market. And as people listen to this guy, as the semiconductor industry and NVIDIA and Oracle are starting to sell off, and people are starting to question about Anthropic and OpenAI, as it's starting to sell off, people like him will start to pump it up. Well, it could get better. They're cheaper stocks now, and there'll be a little bit of a retracement. But the reality is, OpenAI and Anthropic have poor business models. They can't make money. There's no possibility that they can make money. And because of that, they'll sell down some more. Now, I'm sure that the really important money managers out there that are moving money around the world, that are already exiting the semiconductor industry, already exiting the AI industry, are smarter than this guy and better dressed. So keep in mind, there are going to be people that are going to be pumping up OpenAI and Anthropic, even though they have poor business models. But the smart money is shorting. And if you listen to me, you will make money. Don't trust this fucker. Because if everything was hunky-dory, why did he have to partner with someone? Because he sees the writing on the wall. And he was trying to save his own skin. Now, what does this sound like? Circular financing, no real revenue. That sounds like Enron. But then there's a little bit of a difference here. There's systemic risk with people that were building their models and business processes to an LLM where that company is not sustainable. So there's a systemic risk that's happening, plus with the loans, the contracts, that if one of the major players falls, the whole thing falls apart. Well, that sounds like Lehman. Contagion. What did we learn from Lehman? There were nodal points that caused contagion. and that it blew up the whole economy, the world economy. In this case, the contagion is related to business processes that people have been building out, also the tech and semiconductor industry, finance. It'll tie to finance because they have issued loans to these companies, bought commercial paper. So you have the investor class that is going to be holding the bag. There's contagion there. So it's going to affect the finance industry a little bit, but not as bad as Lehman. I'll grant you that. But the key to Lehman was twofold. They thought they could move risk to someone else and it won't affect them, and did not fully understand the feedback loop with these nodal points with the contagion. That's the big takeaway from Lehman. What happened? You can't push off risk to someone else in mass and not hurting you in the long run. And there's these nodal points that allow for contagion. What did we learn from Enron? The circular financing with no real revenues, no real net profit, eventually collapses. So it's a combination of the two, Enron and Lehman. It's a combination. But it won't be as big as Lehman because it's not dealing with the housing industry. But it probably could push us into a recession. And when that happens, you may start seeing defaults and the banking industry will start to hurt. If we fall into a recession and you start hearing banks are worried, then you want to start shorting the banking industry. But we're not there yet. We're not there yet. But there's elements of a Lehman-like event because of the contagion that this could set off, and this idea of you can just shift risk. This idea, he uses the term, well, OpenAI, they're forcing customers to just pay rent. Really? Really? And not realize that this business model isn't sustainable and brings down a lot of people like Oracle? You can't just shift the risk. You can't just assume that someone else will pick up the pieces. There's a feedback loop with this chaotic system that we will call the AI build out. But the circular financing and no real income, that's a little bit like Enron. Pay attention to this. It's already starting. The sell-off in semiconductors is starting. And the S&P 500 is having a hard time getting back up. Now, with the war, there's also a headwind. With higher energy costs, that's also another headwind. And that's the reason why I'm lowering my target to 7,600 for the S&P 500 to 7,800. It used to be 7,800 to 8,000. I'm lowering my target. And I highly, we'll see where it goes. But once it hits 7,600, you may want to move about a third of your money in cash. All right. Now, but if you pay attention to my show, I will show you what I'm doing tactically with selling the semiconductors on the tech stocks. We're going to play this video. Now, keep in mind, if things were so great, why did he have to partner up with someone? And if things were so great, why is it that what he's saying doesn't match the reality of the movement of money in the semiconductor and the tech industry? People are moving it out. Now, watch his face when he's asked the question about his new role. You have to remember, he was on Bloomberg all the time. Now, there is a historical precedence here with Bloomberg. They have a tendency to pump up people. Let me give you an example. On Emily Chan's show, when she was doing the Bloomberg Tech in the Bay Area every night after the market closed, she was pumping up FTX, and that's Sam Friedman. Never asking the right questions like, how are you really managing the client money? And because it was all new and shiny, oh, this is Bitcoin and crypto and everything's going to be hunky-dory. This is a whole new industry and all this. And it was nothing but a Madoff scandal. It was a Ponzi scheme. And Bloomberg couldn't discern that was happening. They pumped it up. I didn't have any responsibility. And once FTX blew up and he was indicted, Emily Chan seemed to go away for a while. Wonder why. Oh, she decided to have a kid. And then they rebooted her show as some sort of like moving around and talking to people and doing documentaries for Bloomberg instead of actually doing a show per day. They kind of kept her quiet. Now that's crypto and FTX and how that all blew up. Look at what's happening with AI. But we don't even have to look at AI. Let's go back a little bit farther. Bloomberg kept them pumping up back in 2005, 2006, how great the market is. And mortgage companies and the banking industry is making all this money and didn't ask the question about the systemic risk. Now, hindsight's always 20/20. But you're telling me that all these investigative journalists that are working at Bloomberg couldn't figure it out? Same thing's happening with AI. They're pumping it up, not asking the real questions. This guy isn't part of it. This guy is the Sam Friedman of of AI. You know how Sam Friedman was FTX for crypto? This guy was pumping it up. This guy is similar. He's not running a Ponzi scheme, but he's a marketer. He's trying to pump something up. It's not even real. It's not sustainable. Anyone with just an ounce of corporate finance background will realize OpenAI and Anthropic do not have sustainable business models for the way they're set up. But if things are so good, why did he have to partner up with someone as the semiconductor industry is starting to sell off, as the AI industry is starting to sell off, as we're starting to see stress with the hyperscalers?
Our audience, new position, what kind of seat are you speaking from?
Yeah, so again, partner and really be, on a research perspective, that's going to be my main role at Yorkville Ives, but it's a modern merchant bank. I mean, this is
Yorkville Ives. So he's merging with the company. He's a partner and a senior managing director. Well, that sounds like a fancy title. And it's a merchant bank. So you're going to loan some money. See, this is kind of like, sounds like Lehman all over again. The big companies started to pull away, and these little companies were starting to put more injection money as they tried to pump up this retracement. This is what I'm talking about with the retracement. It pumps up the semiconductor industry a little bit, and then all of a sudden it sells off. Let it, and then short the damn market. There are going to be sharks that are going to be eating him. Watch. And the way his eyes were and the way he was answering that, it was like, you know what? You've actually watered down your position. Now, how do I know that? You got this fancy title, partner and senior managing director. Yorkville Ives and Co. It's like a merchant bank. Really? Well, wait a minute here. Why do you need to do that? I thought you were going to make so much money in your fund. Oh, it's starting to fail. So he's got to find some money to kind of help pump it up. And when he was asked that question, He's kind of like lost in trying to get the right words out. But what is he going to be doing as a partner and senior managing director? What is he going to do? Let's listen. I bet it's going to be watered down, like an analyst role, like a marketing role. Watch.
Something for me, 25 plus years on Wall Street, it's the evolution, it's the next step. It's something to really build something that I think is going to be special in this market, but really focused in terms of sectors, AI, tech, infrastructure, energy, because where I view the fourth industrial revolution, so excited to do this and found just the best partners to do it.
These companies are borrowing a lot of money. They're spending a lot of money. The questions we're asking this morning, based on developments out of China, is whether they're borrowing too much and spending too much. What's your reaction to what we've heard from China?
I think this is just called a white knuckle moment, no different than a mini DeepSeek moment to some extent. The reality is, like, look, models, you're going to have.
If that's the case, then why? That just came out yesterday. This whole issue with China. White knuckle moment. All right, if it's a white knuckle moment, then why has NVIDIA been selling off since May? Why is it that Oracle is having problems? Why is it that OpenAI couldn't go IPO? Because they couldn't find any investors. Why is it that Anthropic has to scare everybody to try to get a $1 trillion evaluation with their Mythos model? If things were so great, why did he have to partner up with Merchant Bank? Energy, I agree with, but that's been going all the way back to the Rockefeller days. That hasn't changed. That's why I focus so much on it. But AI, there's going to be a big sell-off here.
Or models over the next 5-7 years, vertical, geographic. The reality is that it's Anthropic and OpenAI's world, and everyone else paying rent relative to the models. Gemini clearly narrowing the gap. China, you're going to continue to see, very good models come out of there, but it's my view.
But they're going to be paying the rent, really? Why aren't these companies profitable? Oh, you'll build it out, and then you'll be so dependent on it that they'll be able to command the price. Really? We're already hearing companies pulling back on their tokens. They're reducing their budgets. They're de-tokenizing. See the problem here? Something doesn't make sense. Business is really simple. Money in, money out. You want more money coming in than money going out. You don't need to know anything but that. It's that simple. On any business. This guy is trying to talk up the market.
Broader spending, the trillions of dollars spent that you're seeing in AI, it's less about the models, it's about the data, it's about ultimately the build out. And I think that is something that
it's all about the build out and the data. Well, wait a minute. Most of that data are businesses. They're building agents or individuals running queries to help them improve their workflow. So it's about the data. But wait a minute. That means that you really don't have control of your IP. And so there's going to be a big rush to just keep it in-house or just not do it. So OpenAI doesn't take your IP or Anthropic. So it's about the data and the build out. Now let's put our business hat on. Money in, money out. Money in needs to be more than money out. $1 trillion build out. Who will pay the $1 trillion? Now, we have a 39 trillion GDP. Let's just say 40, just to round it. $40 trillion GDP for the United States. He's saying that this build out is worth 1/40th of our nation's GDP. The United States GDP, 1/40th of it is the build out. Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. Who's going to pay for that $1 trillion build out? Where's the money? Okay, maybe a hyperscaler can make 20 billion, 30 billion. The software industry that took a long time to mature is about 1.4 trillion in activity revenues. And we've spent $1 trillion just to build out AI that has not been proven out. See the point I'm making here? Doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. How will OpenAI and Anthropic and companies like them be able to charge their customers enough to be able to pay for the $1 trillion build out? So let's think about this for a second. Now, granted, let's just say every single person in the United States uses OpenAI. Just this is simplified. But let's say every person decides to use, let's say, OpenAI and Anthropic. And there's $1 trillion build out. Now, there are other companies, but I'm trying to simplify it. So there are about approximately 350 million people in the United States. So everyone, the little babies and the grannies, are using it. Let's just assume that, which is not the case, but let's just say, so you have $1 trillion out there that have to be made up somehow. That's a billion. That's $1 trillion. That's a lot of zeros. Million, billion, trillion. All right. And there's 350 million people in the United States. That means that every single person in the United States would have to pay to OpenAI or Anthropic $2,857.14 to justify the $1 trillion buildup. Now, who is going to be paying that service fee? Most people won't. And that number is much higher because not everybody is using it because of their age. So the number is probably double or triple. So it's probably $3,000 to $6,000 per person. Who's going to pay that? And it's not something that once you build it out that it's all hunky-dory. The chips burn out. 10% of the chips burn out within the first 18 months. And because of chip design, they're obsolete within 3 years. So you got to build out some more. And it's always more and more and more and more. It's not sustainable. It's not a sustainable model.
GQ earnings.
But doesn't this show that China is not that behind the United States? They're neck and neck when it comes to AI development.
I think for the first time in 30 years, it's not even a question that US is ahead of China when it comes to tech. Now, when it comes to models, in terms of the more of a commoditization, open source in the way that they're going after, are they ahead when it comes to robotics, when it comes to energy? Yeah. But there's one chip in the world fueling the AI revolution, godfather of AI, Jensen, NVIDIA. And I think what you see from hyperscalers, what you see from OpenAI and Anthropic, this is going to be an arms race. But I don't even think there's a question where the US is relative to China. When these moments happen, you'll see jitters, white knuckles, stocks will sell up.
Why is China able to do it cheaper?
Because at the end of the day, the open source model, if you look, whether DeepSeek or any others, when you compare to what Anthropic's doing to what OpenAI is doing, that's tip of the sphere. In other words, OpenAI and Anthropic, they're going after the enterprise market. The models are just really the start of what the broader sort of end-to-end framework is going to be. When you think about where the vast majority of spending is going to be in AI, it's not necessarily in the models, it's in the data center build-outs, the CapEx, where ultimately is going to be physical AI. I just continue to
Exactly. The big build out is going to be the chips and the servers, but they need to be paid. Who pays? Anthropic, OpenAI, and companies like that. But who pays them? Customers, businesses, and homes. Companies are not going to pay this exorbitant fee constantly to OpenAI to run their agents. It's not a sustainable business model.
It happened on the models. I don't get as sort of nervous when movements like
There's
this
the
happen.
spending phase. Can we talk about the end phase? And I know this is really difficult to do.
Supposedly, it's cheaper for them to make the models because they're probably pillaging and using an LLM like Anthropic or OpenAI to help build their model through inference. So it's cheaper. That's one way to do it. I believe that's how DeepSeek does it. I'm not an expert at this. I don't want to be an expert at it. All right, I'm an expert at other things. But the point here is they can do it cheaper with the calculations to build out their models, probably through inference. But they're also figuring out ways to use older chips to get maybe not the same performance of the model and the same performance of the calculation, but good enough. It's like the 80-20 rule. You really need to be 100% of an LLM or of a hyperscaler, or maybe you just have to be 20%. And maybe that 20% is a lot cheaper than to get that extra. I'm sorry, that 80% is a lot cheaper than get that extra 20%. So the point I'm making here is that there's probably a subsidizing that's taking place with the government, and they are doing inference and using cheaper chips. And since things are subsidized and there is a desire to be catching up, there's a will to catch up, they figure a way. And OpenAI, and to his mission, OpenAI and Anthropic are hoping that the bulk of the money that's coming in the near term will be coming from enterprises. Well, wait a minute here. So the majority of the haul to be able to pay for the $1 trillion build out, even if you try to break even within a 3-year period, is going to be on the backs of enterprises. They're going to be paying $30,000 a year or whatever. I don't think that's going to happen. I really don't. I really don't think that's going to happen. And you're going to have business owners going, why am I spending all this money? Why do we have a budget of, why are we spending $2 million a year on tokens while you're only getting 3% improvement in business processes for the far majority of the companies out there? Now, when you're talking about AlphaFold and scientific discovery or using these models for mathematical computation to understand the cosmos, that's a totally different world that we're talking about. But for like regular business, tell me, what business really needs AI? Not a scientific big pharma type business. I don't know, like a regular business, all right, let's say you have a pizzeria. Do you really need AI? No. What about a clothing store? Do you need AI? No. What about a car wash? Do you need AI? No. What about if you have a app company that analyzes health data to warn you if you're going to have a heart attack or not? Do you need AI? No, you can code that without AI. Would AI help with the code? Maybe. With vibe coding? Maybe. That's a big maybe. But how many companies are like that? Not too many. the far majority of the companies out there are somewhat boring companies, but yet those are the ones that drive the bulk of the GDP in the country. Most businesses don't need AI. So when you have let's say you're a funeral home, do you need AI for that? No. What about a nursing home? Do you need AI? No. Now, let's say in a banking industry, do you really need AI? Well, really not, because you can use machine learning to do the same stuff and you don't have to pay Sam Altman to think. I mean, literally, their business model is, we are going to force you to pay us so your company can think. I don't think it's sustainable. But what it is that Silicon Valley has run out of good ideas. And they just keep on fake it until you make it, fake it until you make it. We may actually see Oracle go bankrupt within the next 3 years. There is a decent probability of that happening.
Is ultimately going to be made? The application layer, the infrastructure layer, where do you think the money will be made?
I think it's the application infrastructure layer that's going to really be the hearts and lungs. Because if you think about today, all the data centers getting built, those data centers are going to be like a factory for cars. You build out the factory, but now you actually need the lines. What's the operation? When you look at as more and more companies and the use cases, that's enterprise, that's software, that's use cases.
Are you confident the app layer won't become commoditized?
I would tell you the more and more companies that I talk to that are deploying AI and going down the AI path, I feel that that's become less and less of a risk. There'll be winners and losers. There'll be ones where ultimately they're on the wrong side of it, and maybe some of those stocks are reflecting some of the nervousness. But the view today is that, look, we're still in the third inning of the AI revolution. Now, we start off, we're in the second inning. This is not seventh, eighth inning because of where this is all going in terms of the physical.
The financing is drying up. That sounds like the railroad crash of 1873. The build out is too fast. That sounds like the crash of 1873 with the railroads. The business model isn't sustainable with the cost to build out relative to what you can charge your customers. That sounds a lot like the 1873 crash. I'm not the only one saying this. Something doesn't make sense. Now, these servers, once you build it out, it's a little bit different than the internet. It's a little bit different than the actual railroads, because once you built the railroad system and the lines, they lasted. You have to maintain them, but they last for a long time. A locomotive engine lasts for a long time if you take care of it. Once that fiber optic cable was laid, it lasts for a long time. With these data centers, there's a 10% burnout rate within the first 18 months. And the chips are only going to last for 3 years because of obsolescence. So the data centers depreciate pretty quickly. And then you have to not just depreciate physically, but what will happen is that you would have to buy new chips every 3 years or every 5 years. Now, that's a good business for NVIDIA, assuming that the hyperscalers have a customer that pays on time, which they don't. If things were so good, why is Blackstone starting to pull back on some of deals for renting out facilities? Why is it that they're slowing down on the construction of Stargate? Maybe they built out too much. Why is it that Meta is deciding to rent out space on their servers? Sounds like they built out too much, and that Meta needs some cash flow. And then we're going to just build applications off of this AI system, and that it's going to be commoditized. And not only that, NVIDIA is starting to see, you know what, there's too much exposure to the hyperscalers. We need to make a chip that actually goes into a PC. And so it's going to get rid of that dumb client, that dumb client server methodology that he was promoting, and it's going to move local. And people are going to have their own model that they're using that's proprietary, and that they will be in control of their own AI agents, and therefore they're controlling the costs. Now it's going to cost money to build out their models and their agents, but they're in control of it and not beholden to some sort of emperor of AI, aka Sam Altman. Now, will AI be around and be useful in society eventually? Yes. But nowhere near what he's saying in the short term. And many companies that have built out so fast, they will feel the same pains as what we felt in 1873 with the build out of the railroads. There were commercial paper that was being issued that weren't backed by real deposits with these banks and trusts, and it blew up. So it was the financing. Once that stopped, the railroad crash happened and affected the rest of the economy. So here comes back the contagion that I was talking about. You're going to have a crash, and it's going to bring down a big part of the market that could potentially lead us into a recession, similar to 1873. The probability of 1873 revisited is higher than what he's saying is going to happen. There's probably a 75% chance of an 1873 crash than utopia. So you got a 75% chance of crash. You have a 25% chance of this clown saying that we're going to live in utopia and everyone's going to be paying $3,000 a year to Sam Altman. Really? Or Anthropic? No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Yeah, look what Apple's doing. That's just starting the consumer AI revolution, where they're essentially a toll booth in the AI highway.
What's going on with Alphabet and Gemini? Why are they behind?
I view that in terms of everything that they're doing.
You notice how he uses these terms, they fancy, these kind of like, off the cuff. Oh, we're only in the third inning and the toll booth of the AI highway and all this. Like, you have to get in. See, this is the commercialization. This is the marketing strategy. So you have to know that. You have to be involved. Your company, if you don't get involved right now, you're going to be dead in 6 months. And all of these dumb CEOs and CFOs and COOs bought into this bullshit lie. Why? Because most C-suite people are stupid.
But the reality is that their end-to-end framework, from cloud to Gemini to what's happening on search, they can catch up pretty quickly. And I just think they've narrowed the gap much more than anyone would have thought. And it goes back to a year ago, New York City cab drivers bearish in Alphabet. Look where they are today. And
Where are they today?
I say New York City cab drivers still bearish. Maybe they're bearish on Microsoft versus where
I think you've got to come with a new face, because in my experience with my New York City cab drivers, they're better on this market than most people I speak to on a daily basis.
And that's very healthy because of ultimately more and more retail.
They're bold and strong.
They have a big seat at the table. And I know New York City cab drivers now they're driving.
See, he switched his story when you had actually someone pushing back. Let's replay that. See, the guy is a marketer. He's a marketing bullshit guy. Let's just, I mean, I can't stand the way he dresses. What the fuck is wrong with him?
I think New York City cab drivers still bearish. Maybe they're bearish
Bearish?
on Microsoft versus where, you know.
I think you've got to come up with a new phrase because in my experience with my New York City cab drivers, they're better on this market than most people I speak to on a daily basis.
And that's very healthy because of ultimately more and more retail.
They're long and strong.
They have a big seat at the table. And I know New York City cab drivers, now they're driving Bentleys because of
See,
this
it's
market.
bullshit.
Like they'll be sent, I remember years ago, they'd be like, I really like Tesla. I'd be like, what, this multiple? That's
Cab
crazy.
City drivers aren't driving Bentleys because of their insight on the market. I mean, come on. The guy's a dipshit. The guy's a dipshit. If he was right, then why is it that the semiconductor industry is down? It's selling off. Why? Because of all the things that I just mentioned. The circular financing is a problem. The continued funding of operations that are not making any money. The customers are pissed off that it's costing too much and they're not getting a ROI. That's the problem. And Ives can't really solve that. He can dress up like a clown. He can say all these things like Apple is the toll booth for the AI highway. Do you really need it? Do you really need it? No. The answer is no.
To the moon, up and to the right.
And that's why a lot of them are driving Bentleys.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Trucks.
Or Cybertruck.
And many of them don't know where they're going anymore, which is its own problem.
That
You know,
is,
are they connected to the phone now?
No,
Like,
I had an
the
experience
addresses, the
recently even
GPS.
worse. A taxi driver took my phone and said, do you mind if I keep it up here? And I just only needed it for 5 minutes. I was like, I need it back. I have calls coming in. He's like, I need it for the whole ride.
and then there are times like, why are you taking the Holland tone? You should be taking it off.
Yes.
And then you have to
Yes.
start to,
I don't know where to go.
it's an issue.
I know. Dennis, good to see you. Great. Thank you, sir. No dress code at Yorkville.
We're gonna be dressing more and more color at Yorkville Labs.
I do.
Do they know that?
They do know that, and I think this is all.
He had to partner up because he knows that as the semiconductor industry is selling off, he needs to find a safe haven. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the Manuka honey lozenges or the orange splash lozenges. They are made from structural nanosilver. It'll help to create the secretions that you need to protect your oral pharynx for the cold season, for the allergy season. And guess what? We have this problem with the fires from California. And there's fires from California, there's fires from Minnesota, and there's also fires from Canada. So it depends on where you live in the United States. But there's a lot of particulate matter in the air, and many states are in unhealthy conditions. So it's really important to protect that oral pharynx. So get the lozenges to do that. Also, you can use the Cleanse or Max 35, gargle with it about 20 seconds and swallow it. That will help to protect your oral pharynx and boost up that innate immune system. Very important, especially with what's going on with the fires. And the gels. You can get the structural nanosilver gel in the tube form, or you can get it in the quick dispenser form called Renew. They're dual purpose. It'll help to heal a lesion quicker. You can use it as a daily skincare and lightly coat your nostrils. If you're cleaning the house, if it's during the cold season, if it's during the allergy season, or when you're dealing with going outside in this particulate matter issue with the fires. It'll help to protect. And this is really important because if you breathe this stuff in regularly, this particulate matter that's in the air from the fires, what will happen is it'll disrupt your epithelial lining in your oral pharynx and you'll have an upper respiratory infection. You don't want that. In addition, when you breathe this stuff in too much, it'll get into your lungs and it'll cause problems with breathing, and it may cause problems with cardiovascular. And if it's chronic, this could cause inflammation, cause disruption of the barrier of the vascular system around the alveoli, pro-inflammatory cytokines and other proteins, and this particulate matter may get into the bloodstream and start causing havoc to other organ systems, including your brain. because when you have this pro-inflammatory state with toxins that are in your blood, your blood-brain barrier may dilate a little bit and then leak into the vascular system of your brain and cause inflammation. You don't want that, trust me. So it's really important. Get the gels, lightly coat your nostrils, gargle with Cleanse or Max 35, and get lozenges. And use them to help protect the oral pharynx. A lot of people are going to have pulmonary problems in the next month to 2 months. Magnesium and zinc. Magnesium and zinc will help to boost up the immune system and help with the brain function. Vitamin C and magnesium also helps with boosting up the immune system and the brain function. But vitamin C also helps with improving your skin. So take both. Myotrol. Myotrol will help to build muscle. This will help with the gene expression to build muscle and maintain muscle. Super important if you're 40 years of age or older. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. This has polyphenols, flavonoids, and lignans to help with that gene expression. Omega-3. Omega-3 is super important to take to help with your cardiovascular health. It brings down inflammation, helps you to control your lipid profile, and helps to reduce the over-stickiness of your red blood cells to prevent overclotting. Omega-3 is super important to take every day to help boost up that cardiovascular health. And resveratrol. Resveratrol helps with youthful gene expression, helps with your basal layer for your skin so you look younger. Stacks really well with C60 to help with your skin. Resveratrol helps to get rid of senescent cells to help with that youthful gene expression. And resveratrol soaks up free radicals and boosts up your energy by improving the health of your mitochondria. You want to look younger? You want to be younger? Guess what? Take resveratrol. And vitamin B complex. If you're 40 years of age or older, get vitamin B complex. Why? Vitamin B12 protects your neurons. Vitamin B complex revs up your cellular metabolism, so you have more energy. And the first 4 B vitamins in this complex will help the mitochondria so it produces more ATP. And guess what? When you have more ATP, your cells perform better. Super important. Please take the vitamin B complex if you're 40 years of age or older. And lastly, digestive enzyme complex. This is going to help to break up carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids, reduce the load on your pancreas. You don't want to be a Steve Jobs. You don't want to die from some pancreatitis or pancreatic cancer or anything like that. So digestive enzyme complex is going to reduce the load on your pancreas, allow you to absorb your nutrients and digest them with less stress on your digestive system. It has bromelain in it. Bromelain is an enzyme to help break up clots, super important for your cardiovascular health. And digestive enzyme complex has the proteolytic enzymes to break up glycoproteins, which is super important during the cold season. That's the reason why I said take digestive enzyme complex during the crisis. Amazing how it worked. Please go to my store. Get these supplements to help slow down the aging process. And if you want to mitigate the problems of the fires and protect your health, get the lozenges, the Max 35, and the structural nanosilver gel. All right, now let's pivot over to what I paused with the live stream from Bloomberg.
US may be losing ground in the global AI race.
Earlier today, we spoke with Bloomberg's Mike Shepard and Minmin Low about China's push to become the new AI leader.
It's definitely an important priority for the Chinese government. In fact, they are grooming this entire AI sector as the next big export engine for China as the country transitions away from older industries like property, which is really in a big slump for several years now. So they're pouring a lot of investments to provide the patient capital to groom all these startups in the sector. And it's all part of the...
So let me get this straight. These companies aren't going to be making real products that you buy. They're going to be service companies where you issue your AI agent to their model and they compute and then send you back an answer. Why are you paying someone to think for you in your company? I'm just saying. Doesn't make sense. It's either going to be local, and that build out should be local, not remote. Because don't you want to protect your important data, your IP? You want to send your data to China? I mean, Sam Altman is bad enough because he's going to look at that data and say, you know what, he'll see patterns, and they can go, well, we can create an application or a software that will help you with that type of industry. But they don't know what to do because they don't know anything about the industry. So they're collecting information. Now, if Sam Altman's doing that, what the hell do you think the Chinese are going to be doing? Doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense. And if you're CEO and you're listening to me right now, if you're a CEO or a CFO or a COO, if you're part of the C-suite and you're listening and you aren't pulling the plug of your AI development in your company, you're a fucking dipshit. Now, if you're just an employee of a large company and your CEO or C-suite is telling you to do this stuff, maybe you should start reverberating some of the things that I'm saying and basically say, this doesn't make sense for the company. Where's the ROI? If you can spend all this money to do this for no proof of an ROI, why aren't you getting a raise? Why aren't the shareholders getting a higher dividend if you can spend all this money? Because the C-suite got scared through a marketing strategy that was a pump and dump. It's a fake it until you make it strategy from Silicon Valley. And all these CEOs bought into it. The C-suite too dumb to see it because they got scared. This mythos thing about the vulnerabilities of the internet, you can find them in older models that are open sourced. Those older models can find most of the vulnerabilities that Mythos was finding. So, well, wait a minute here. Not only is the vulnerability more by using this, but the sales pitch about Anthropic is more hype because they're not unique. They're not this unique thing that you absolutely have to have. But the C-suite isn't smart enough to dive in and really think. And all of a sudden they start paying money and then realize they aren't getting the ROI and they start to pull back, and then we have the market crash.
China had laid out early this year, right, in March at the two sessions. They have an AI plus plan where they want to encourage adoption of AI across all sectors of the economy over the next decade or so. And just to give you a sense of how important AI is, this World AI Conference in Shanghai is in the 9th edition. And I remember in the early years, not many journalists would even bother attending, but now it's a completely different story. Even President Xi himself came to town to grace the event personally. And this really represents an upgrade to the status of this event, which in the last 2 years, it was attended by Premier Li Qiang, who is the #2 leader in China. And President Xi gave this big speech this year. A lot of it was, of course, also a veiled message to the US as well, because he talked about how when it comes to AI governance, the world needs to take a multilateral approach. The world needs to learn from one another, and AI development shouldn't be a solo development of one country. And all of the Chinese state media, you look at the Communist Party mouthpiece, People's Daily, they've been publishing editorials about how tech and AI should not become a monopoly. It should really be treated as a global public good that is shared with the rest of the world. So again, President Xi positioning himself as this leader of the global South, advocating for Britain.
And you know what? When OpenAI was a nonprofit funded by Elon Musk, the whole idea was that it was going to be open sourced. The whole idea was this was supposed to be a public good. And in some reason, Satan got in charge of OpenAI and decided to turn it into a private entity.
Right, so he announced a few key initiatives, including offering at least 5,000 training opportunities in AI for people in the developed countries and allowing them, some 30 countries to tap into this AI-powered meteorological system to safeguard their homes, for example. So really, and also, yes, a couple of days ago, there were some 29 countries who signed up to be part of this China-led group called the World AI Cooperation Organization. And it's just yet another platform that could give China more sway in shaping global AI norms.
Mike, how does this impact American companies? I mean, obviously they're already down the road with a lot of these investments. They can't claw them back at this point, but they have to be looking at this and being very concerned. Is there a way for them to pivot? And then you also have the Trump administration starting to talk about having a new regulatory.
So it's selling off. They're talking about the market selling off. They're talking about the semiconductors been selling off for a while. The S&P 500 will retrace because of just it's the broad market, but the semiconductor industry is going to be continuing to sell off, and that's the reason why I keep on saying start using these ETFs and short the semiconductor and the tech stocks every day. Every day you wake up, you short, you make some money, close it. Next day, short, make some money, close it. Next day, short, make some money, close it. And that way you can take the profits and roll it into the S&P 500 and buy when it's low. And you're accumulating shares. So when it does come back up, you are benefiting from it. Now, I just told you how to survive this bullshit that Sam Altman created. That the overinvestment in the hyperscalers created. Now, if this really gets bad, it's going to cause a recession. And there are going to be more people unemployed. We have around 4.2%, 4.3% unemployment. I think the new number is 4.2. That's the U3 data, the unemployment number. The U6 data is much higher. It's like 8.3, 8.4%. But the point here is the headline number is low. But the headline number is going to get a lot higher if we go into a recession. And the U6 number will be even higher than that. So we probably, if we get to a recession, we probably see a 4.2% unemployment go to about 6.5% unemployment. And the U6 unemployment from 8.3% or 8.4% to maybe even 12%.
For AI, does that compound the difficulties American AI companies could now face?
Well, take the second part first there, Christina, because it's the latest, and it was a scoop from last night from our team here in DC. And the companies actually would welcome some sort of a coherent approach to AI safety reviews. And an issue is, they did not like the way that Anthropic's Fable 5 and Mythos 5 were essentially ordered off the market via export controls over concerns that the guardrails on them weren't adequate. And we saw the same sort of pressure.
But when people ran the models that were open sourced and other models that were proprietary, they noticed similar results in terms of finding the vulnerabilities. So Mythos isn't as powerful as people are saying in relative terms. It was a strategy to have Anthropic get $1 trillion valuation before they go IPO. Before Mythos came out, their estimated valuation was $380 billion. After Mythos fiasco and the fear that was created, it ended up going to a potential $1 trillion market, all with smoke and mirrors. And these individuals from Bloomberg and from the other business channels, or the ones that are heavily invested in the AI build out, they're making these statements. Well, wait a minute. What about some of the other data points, like the other models also found vulnerabilities? So is Mythos special? No. Does it justify a market valuation of $1 trillion? $1 trillion? Yet they didn't make any money yet? Look how long it took Apple to become $1 trillion company. Look how long it took Chevron or ExxonMobil to become a $1 trillion company. It takes time. You don't just instantaneously become a $1 trillion company. Look at what happened with SpaceX. It's a major sell-off. Wait, there's going to be another sell-off too once individuals start exiting that are in the lockup. But once they start exiting, it'll go down even more. I suspect it'll go to about $100 a share, maybe $94 a share before it would be a good buy. But the point here is just that these individuals are just making statements and they aren't really paying attention to what are the other models, how do they perform with the vulnerabilities? Is Mythos really that much better in terms of finding vulnerabilities? And that, a major tool for hackers? Or maybe the other models are too. And when people actually did the research, it came out that these other models can do it too. So we're manufacturing a consensus that's stating that Anthropic is really important. Yet it's not, and it's not making any fucking money.
OpenAI, but the companies had felt that it was overboard and also kind of ad hoc in the approach, and they would like to see a more coherent framework. And what's taking shape is, a FINRA-like model, one that would resemble what the broker-dealer industry on Wall Street faces, that it's an industry funded and not industry run, but industry certainly has a lot of input to how the rules of the road are set. And in this case, it would be the safety testing. And that would give them a little bit more of, a clear path forward when it comes to dealing with the government and how far they can take their models as they develop them. More broadly, though, the question of how companies are reading this moment. Look, many of them are playing the long game. And all this week, we heard from TSMC. They were reporting, look, we are seeing demand for AI chips and AR hardware going through 2030. It is going to be hard to meet. And that is a message that was echoed by SK Hynix during Ed Ludlow's interview with the CEO just little more than a week ago, as they were making their public market debut here in the U.S. And it's a message that's been reinforced by NVIDIA Chief Executive Officer Jensen Huang. They just see the demand from hyperscalers here in the U.S. and even elsewhere as being off the charts. And NVIDIA also caught a bit of a break, and some of the other American companies caught a break too, with the declassification of the United Arab Emirates, which is trying to establish itself as a real center of development for AI. And they see that as a new market that they can break into and try to export the American tech stack. But really, you do see this contrast of visions of Xi Jinping laying out something that is very multilateral, and President Donald Trump arguing one that is very much America first, and it really doesn't have all.
Now, think about it. China comes out with this, capability. It scares the semiconductor industry, scares the people that are invested in AI. But then all of a sudden, there's a desire for the government to come in and help. So maybe we're seeing a bailout starting to come out where Oracle can't pay their debt, or AI can't pay their bill to the servers. And all of a sudden you start seeing sovereign wealth fund concept to bail them out for the sake of national security.
Pieces together in the same way that you do see China putting on the table now.
I'm just looking at that sell-off. You saw NVIDIA lose a lot of ground yesterday, and Apple gaining a lot of ground. These two companies with huge market caps really vying for top spot there.
That's up, meet in the middle there.
Yeah, we got earnings coming up here, so we'll see what happens here in the weeks ahead.
All right, and coming up, does the Iran war pose a political liability for Republicans this fall? We're going to hear from Democratic Senator Chris Murphy.
So we'll go to some other 13 troops injured, it looks like, injured in Iran war this week. So we'll play that clip. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the probiotics. You can get it in powdered form or veggie cap form. A good probiotic is really important for your health. It's going to help with sleeping. It'll help to improve your gut biome, your absorption of your nutrients, improve your immune system at the gut level, reduce inflammation, help with your metabolism. Good health starts at the gut. Get my probiotics. Also, clarity factor helps with brain function, helps get rid of that brain fog and allows you to concentrate. Over time, what will happen is you'll have positive neuroplasticity. Your dendritic connections will improve. You'll think faster and have better memory. This is very important to take every day. Good night corn millet helps to get into the 3 to 5 cycles of REM sleep and deep sleep to consolidate memory, detoxify your central nervous system, and be well rested. It has tryptophan, melatonin, GABA, and passion flower. Do this every night to slow down the aging process. Good sleep every night helps with brain function and helps to slow down aging. Vitamin D3, it's a dual purpose. It's going to help with bone density, help with your cardiovascular health, help with your immune system, and help with the gene expression of your cells, because vitamin D3 is a gene expression cofactor. Please go to my store and get the great supplements I offer. Use discount 5, you get $5 off. It's the-studio-reykjavik.com. The link is in the description. Go to my website, get the great products, help support the work that I do, and get healthy. And short the semiconductor industry. All right, let's listen into live now.
Right now, I do want to get you the latest on the U.S.-Iran conflict, as there have been so many different developments here. Popping that up on your screen, that is a live look over the Strait of Hormuz at this hour, as, again, we get to the latest information coming in from a U.S. Central Command, as they now confirm at least 13 American service members have been injured over the last week, but all of them have survived, and the remarks come after Iran claimed that it had launched an attack on a U.S. base in Syria, capturing and killing American troops. Well, CENTCOM says that did not happen. You can see the post right here from U.S. Central Command, as they Iranian forces claim that they attacked that base in Syria and captured or killed American troops in the process. False. Fact, no U.S. troops in the region have recently been killed or captured. Now, there are also several different developments that are coming in, as we know the U.S. has launched its 7th straight day of strikes there on Iran, as talks have, of course, stalled there. Central Command saying that it hit surveillance sites, military logistics infrastructure, underground weapons storage, and maritime capabilities. U.S. forces employed fighter aircraft, aerial drones, and warships, in addition to other assets. CENTCOM continuing to hold Iran accountable at the Commander-in-Chief's direction while fully enforcing a naval blockade against Iranian ports. Now, we've also heard from I-24 News English that Kuwait is saying Iran struck another power and a desalination plant, warning that it will respond decisively. So it sounds as though Kuwait will be responding. Now, we also know here that Iraq, Jordan, and Kuwait have said that they have received missile fire that they've intercepted from Iran. So much happening here. So I do want to bring in a friend of the show to discuss it all. We do have Javed Ali. He is over at the Gerald R. Ford School of Public Policy at the University of Michigan. He's worked with the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, and the Defense Intelligence Agency. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us today to help break all of this down.
Josh, good morning to you.
Good morning. Well, first off, I want to talk just a little bit further here about that situation there, as we're seeing that those attacks have been essentially put forth by Iran. Missiles fired at Kuwait, Iraq, Jordan. What do you make of the fact that these Gulf Arab nations that are the neighbors of Iran are being fired at as well?
So Josh, here we are now into what looks like a replay of the type of fighting that happened in the early days of the conflict after February 28th. So if your viewers remember, almost immediately, once in the aftermath of Israel and the United States attacking Iran, Iran basically opened fire on the rest of the region and conducted the types of attacks that we're seeing now. The Iranians were doing that literally within minutes or hours of being attacked themselves on February 28th. And then for those first few weeks, that's what the conflict looked like. So Iran is basically using the same playbook that they used months ago. And I think one of the interesting questions is, despite the amount of strikes that the U.S. and to a lesser degree now Israel have conducted against Iran, Iran still has a significant amount of military capability through the ballistic missiles, the drones, and the cruise missiles that either they hadn't used before, that weren't targeted and destroyed or degraded. And so this fight will continue to go on for a while because both sides are still armed fairly significantly.
And one thing that's interesting is you do get a lot of information that comes out of Iran, especially from Iranian state TV, just like what we heard with that attack on the U.S. base in Syria. But we later learned that that base was actually one that the U.S. had withdrawn from back in February as Operation Epic Fury was getting underway. So how exactly do you sort through what is accurate and inaccurate provided by Iran? Because I have to imagine that 99.9% of what Iranian state TV is putting out is false.
Yeah, we've seen in the past that information coming from Iranian-controlled media or government-controlled media is often highly unreliable and bombastic, and it seems like just deliberately false. And is that because they are just trying to shape the narrative and boost morale and play to internal audiences? They're not really concerned about providing facts externally. That's probably likely what's at play, and why they chose to target the Entente garrison in Syria, which had been in years past a pretty important outpost for U.S. Special Operations troops for counter-ISIS operations and other missions in that part of Syria and the region. Maybe they thought that there was still a U.S. presence there, and they decided to target it and use weapon systems. But yeah, you always have to take what comes out of Iranian state media with a grain of salt because it is often not accurate or unreliable.
And we're always asking the folks watching here what they think about the specific subject here. So the question that we're posing, what concerns you the most about the U.S.-Iran conflict right now? And Javed, I'm not sure if you can see it, but it's there on the bottom of the screen. And the options are the war escalating, the safety of the U.S. troops, higher gas prices, and global economic impact. So if you want to vote, all you got to do is scan that QR code bottom right-hand side of your screen, or to make it a little easier, go to livenowfox.com/connect, and the votes are just coming in, so there's not more than a handful at this point, but 77% say the safety of the U.S. troops and 13% the war escalating, 10% saying it's the global economic impact. For folks out there who have heard a lot as we talk about the economic impact, hearing a lot about the Strait of Hormuz, which, I mean, if we're being honest, you didn't hear as much about prior to Operation Epic Fury. But can you kind of explain how that factors in here as you have the U.S. saying, we are the guardians of the Strait of Hormuz, but you have Iran saying, no, we are in charge?
Well, now here we are 4 months into this campaign, and it looks like the key disagreement between Iran and the U.S. is that very issue. Who is going to control the Strait of Hormuz? What will the system of that control look like? Will Iran be allowed to charge tolls or fees for ships coming in and out of the Gulf through the Strait, or will the U.S. do it by maintaining a military presence in the region, which is obviously already there? But there are costs associated for both sides for doing that. And on the U.S. side, going back to some of these poll results you shared, there are still 50,000 plus U.S. Military personnel scattered throughout the region, either on military bases and in parts of the region, or now on 2 carrier battle groups and other naval platforms in the region. So the safety and security of those personnel for either this mission to take control of the strait or to keep engaging in these military operations against Iran. I mean, this is going to be a significant issue. There's also a price tag associated with that well. It's already run into the tens of billions of dollars. So these issues are all intertwined, Josh, but what looks like now that this conflict is basically over who is going to control the Strait of Hormuz. No one's talking anymore about Iran's nuclear program or keeping the status of the clerical regime. It's all about control of the Strait of Hormuz.
I want to talk a little bit more about what we saw essentially as we look back here to last January, I would say, maybe even December, as we were seeing protesters start to take to the streets there across Iran, not just talking about Tehran, but really in cities all over. And of course, we saw those protests kind of die down as more and more protesters were executed. And at this point, it does appear that those protesters are still being executed. We're just not hearing as much about it. And that could potentially be deterring other protesters from taking to the streets again.
Well, in the aftermath of the beginning of the military conflict between Iran, the U.S., and Israel, we have not seen those images that we saw at the beginning of the year and at the end of last year, with Iranians being angry over all the economic and social and cultural issues inside the country. We saw the brutal crackdown from the regime where they basically killed or imprisoned thousands, if not tens of thousands, of their own countrymen. So this is something I don't see happening anytime soon, because the Iranian people, even though they probably are beyond angry at the regime, they have to fear for their own safety and security. And on the flip side, over the past few months, and certainly in the past couple of weeks, we've seen these different kind of images of Iranians mobilizing to the streets for the funeral procession of Ayatollah Khamenei in the mornings over his death. And there were millions of people there. Now, some of that was probably staged and controlled, but still, that's a different type of mood inside the country than the ones we were seeing 6 months ago or at the end of last year.
And what I want to do is actually pop this up once again, because this is a look at the post from Central Command. As we know, this is the 7th straight day in a row that the U.S. has been striking those different spots in Iran. What is that telling us overall about where things are kind of headed now? Because I have to imagine that there's a good likelihood that we're going to have an 8th day, 9th day, 10th day, and so on.
Well, again, like as I said a few minutes ago, I do think this resembles now what we saw at the beginning of the conflict from February 28th to basically mid-April, where every day, both Iran and the United States, and back then Israel, were attacking each other. So here we are now into the 7th day. I agree, we're probably going to see this continue for a while. Is it contained, though, or will it escalate even further? I think that is also a possibility. And what happened to the memorandum of understanding that was agreed to about a month ago, and the 60-day clock for getting all the conditions on that hammered out? A month has passed, so there's only theoretically 30 days left for that MOU to be finalized. So is diplomacy has it completely stopped? And are the prospects for that MOU being finalized just over? That's an open question, but you don't hear either side really talking about restarting or kickstarting the negotiations to finalize the MOU.
All right, I want to talk about some of the other topics here, because the U.S. officials have now essentially said, and this is coming from the Department of National Intelligence, that Hamas, we of course can kind of think back to October 7th, as Israel has been fighting against Hamas since the October 7th attack by the Hamas terror group on Israel. And we're hearing from the DNI that essentially it appears at this point that there are about 20,000 or more Hamas fighters that are out there. And some reports indicate there could be about 25,000 or more that exist at this point. And it does sound as though that's about the same number as we were talking about before October 7th. Break that down for folks, but also kind of explain the significance overall.
Hey, Josh, you and I have talked about October 7th for many interviews in the aftermath of that attack in Israel and before October 7th. The general assessment, both from Israel and the U.S. intelligence community, based on public statements, was that Hamas pre-October 7th had about 20 to 25,000 fighters that either under current arms or they could mobilize if called upon. And if we are hearing now from both the DNI and Israel, because a senior general in the Israeli Defense Forces put that number out a couple of days ago, about roughly 25,000 Hamas fighters. That shows that Hamas, despite all the pressure they were under for 2+ years in the aftermath of October 7th and a lot of losses, to include most of their senior leadership, that the group has maintained the strength of the organization. Now, they just probably backfilled and recruited new people to come into the organization. It's not like they didn't lose anyone for the past couple of years, but that just shows the viability of Hamas. It was not, quote unquote, militarily defeated despite all the pressure it was under. And here we are now into almost 3 years, coming up on the third anniversary of October 7th. And what is the future of Hamas in the Gaza Strip? And Israel's now occupied the Gaza Strip and has 2 combat divisions there. But it doesn't sound like that border peace plan that was supposed to come up with a long-term solution to governance in Hamas or governance in the Gaza Strip and removing Hamas as a governing force. That doesn't seem like it's made much progress.
And of course, before I let you go here, another big question. We talk about Israel, so we also have to talk about the Hezbollah terror group over in Lebanon. As we take a live look over Beirut at this hour, you can see things remain fairly calm, at least from the aerial view that we have here over Beirut. I wanted to ask where things kind of stand. Are we still seeing a ceasefire there? Are we seeing the potential for really Hezbollah firing once again at Israel?
Yeah, I think that could happen at any moment. But there was the ceasefire agreed to a few weeks ago between Israel and the government of Lebanon. Hezbollah was not part of that because they're not formally part of Lebanon. But just like Hamas, Hezbollah has thousands, if not tens of thousands of fighters under arms, still probably has a significant amount of rocket and missile capability that they haven't used or Israel hasn't destroyed or degraded through all the operations Israel has conducted against Hezbollah. So it wouldn't surprise me as well to see a resumption of that really intense fighting we've seen in different stretches in 2024 and 2025 and this year too between Israel and Hezbollah. We just haven't seen it recently, but it could flare up at any moment.
All right, my last question here. I think I said the last one was last, but here's the actual last question. What are you going to be watching for as we talk about the U.S.-Iran conflict? We went into detail here, but specifically over the next hours, days, and even weeks here, what exactly are you going to be watching for?
Well, I think we're going to have to watch to see how long will this continued cycle of attacks by Iran in the U.S. continue. It doesn't seem like there's any signs of that slowing down. Will these attacks also escalate and broaden and intensify in scope or volume? Those are things to watch for. And at the same time, will both sides kind of go back to their respective corners using a boxing analogy? And will diplomacy or negotiations come back to the front? And will the MOU get back on track? So sort of 2 parallel tracks of things to watch that may converge. I think we're just going to have to wait and see how it plays out.
All right, we're going to play the CNBC and Fox analysis of NVIDIA, Micron, SK. But before we do, let's talk about some supplements. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the heirloom barley. Heirloom barley helps to detoxify, bring down inflammation, and soak up free radicals. That's going to help your immune system, your endocrine system, cardiovascular system, even brain function. Gladiator barley gets all the benefits that you have with the heirloom barley, but one extra one, and that helps to build muscle. It's also important to help to detoxify your body regularly. You can do that with the barleys, or you can detoxify your body with taking zeolite. Zeolite will help to bind to heavy metals, toxins, and chemicals and allow you to urinate them out within 6 to 8 hours. Take 3 small drops underneath your tongue, drink filtered water, do that daily. And this stack here is really important to help to slow down the aging process. Turmeric brings down inflammation and soaks up free radicals. Lignans soaks up free radicals and brings down inflammation. It helps the immune system and the immune system and endocrine system. And the ashwagandha root helps to bring down cortisol levels and it helps to control your blood glucose levels. When you stack these together, you're slowing down the aging process. And you're helping the immune system, the endocrine system, cardiovascular system, and brain function. So I highly recommend you stacking these. You can take them separately, but I recommend you stacking them. They work better when you stack them. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Make sure you use discount 5.
Things. It seems like you've had a good run. Micron, AMD, SanDisk, Broadcom, Marvell, NVIDIA, Intel. I guess the story today, Tony, is that if China, we already knew China could do it cheaper, but if China can do it cheaper and better with their open source models, which was the story of this Kimi 3 today, then what happens to not just the margins at the OpenAI and Anthropics, but all the spending that corporate America is doing on those models, and therefore everything else that is powering the likes of the Microns out there, the SanDisk, is all of that going to have to come down because of what China's put out today? That's kind of what's happening, right? It's kind of another DeepSeek moment.
Yeah, I think you're hitting on a good topic here, and I think what the market is struggling with is like, do the frontier model players have to pull back, or do they see this as like kind of a moment like DeepSeek where they actually are
They're not paying attention. It's been selling off. The semiconductors have been selling off since June. NVIDIA has been having a problem since May. Oracle is signaling that they have problems. It's a bigger story than just what China is doing. Now, what people will say is maybe there was a little bit of over sell-off on Friday because of the news from China, and there'll be a little bit of a bump up. And that's when you start shorting. Because the overall trend in the semiconductor industry is down, not up.
Because of what's going on, it's more competitive now. I think a lot of it is like the productization of AI, and specifically on the frontier. Like if you look at like where the economics accrue, it is like at the frontier bleeding edge of technology is where it's all kind of where you earn the most value creation. And then all the kind of smaller commoditization models, like I would say that those will be around. There's maybe usage of those, but I think that it's going to be less likely that those will earn the value of the whole TAM.
Because Kevin, you actually added to a position in NVIDIA.
All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump forward in this broadcast to this interview.
How are you finding the time to send over all these meeting notes?
I got a secret. I've been using Granola.
What is Granola?
So it's an AI notepad. If you want to take notes during the meeting, Granola can.
And look, the semis, by the way, on track for their worst week since April of 2025. And that leads us up to our talk of the tape this hour. Should you buy the pullback, or is there still more pain to come?
No, it's more pain.
Let's ask CNBC contributor Tom Lee, the head of research over at Fundstrat Global Advisors. The chip trade, we've been calling it the epicenter, the tail wagging the dog of the markets, so to speak, for quite some time. But we did see a nice little run up in the midday session for many of these volatile memory stock names. How exactly do investors and traders reconcile the volatility versus what we could see in terms of long-term price appreciation for these particular types of stocks?
Yeah, Tom, I know it's been a very volatile week. If people have been long those names the last couple of weeks, it's been a rough ride, but these companies are at the center of one of the most important strategic initiatives for the U.S., which is AI and AI infrastructure. And that runway has years ahead, and they're going to report next week. So I think that this pullback's healthy because it kind of gets rid of trapped longs, right? and it reduces speculation. And we saw in Korea that it was a huge margin call week. But I would still stick with those. I think those names are going to bounce later this year. So I don't think that the trade is over, but it is just taking a beating.
How much of the market structure as we know it today is causing some of these types of volatile swings that maybe in turn create opportunities, but at the same time create a good amount of angst and a good amount of discomfort with regard to just how people feel about whether or not this is a sustainable amount of momentum for the market?
Yeah, I mean, it's the reality is there's push button liquidity for everybody now, institutions and individuals. And I think that was 0-day trading options and leveraged funds definitely create more volatility. It is always creating an opportunity for the long-term investor, because if someone missed the DRAM trade or the semi trade and now they can buy it, or even Korea, and they can buy it 20% cheaper, that's the entry point. But yeah, it's very difficult. I mean, my institutional clients, many of them are having very difficult years because shifts in the themes or the winds or even visibility cause instant reaction. And it's something people aren't accustomed to.
Is leverage a factor in your mind? Forget about the world of leveraged ETFs, which is a different conversation that we can have in addition to what's going on right now. But from a margin debt standpoint, from a people understanding whether or not they should be long short-term something or short-term something with push-button liquidity, as you point out, is that something that we should be fearful of? Has it reached a point where we could see further market structure deterioration, the likes of which we have not seen up to this point?
100%. Margin debt today is now up 54% year over year, which is the 6th highest rise in like 60 years when you look at monthly data. And the other 5 times, similarly, the market consolidated over the next 6 months 5 to 6 times. Because when that cohort of traders is tapped out, they borrowed money, the market is vulnerable to a drawdown, which is what happened in Korea, right? In Korea, I believe the data is 1.2 million brokerage accounts at a margin call. And that may be as much as 10% of actual adult brokerage accounts. I mean, it's a massive, massive correction follows. So could that happen in the US? Yeah. So that's why a rolling correction, that what we're seeing now, is super healthy, because it's not the whole market coming down. It's just pockets of it. And people have ballast, like owning the Mag 7 or the software stocks.
I have to start with chips, and a lot of these chip makers now in bear market territory. Is this healthy profit taking, or is this?
All right. So we're starting to see the signs of what I've been saying. Now pay attention to my shows next week. I'm going to be shorting the semiconductor industry tactically, in and out type stuff. And beware of that retracement. There's going to be a retracement going up with the semiconductors and the tech stocks, and then it'll come back down. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the structural nail silver toothpaste. This will help to whiten your teeth, freshen your breath, reduce inflammation at your gum line, and improve your gum line. And with good oral hygiene, you're also helping your cardiovascular system and your valvular system. Super important for your heart and your vascular system. This has no fluoride, has the structural nanosilver that helps to neutralize. You should be using this toothpaste every day, but especially during the cold season. Now, I have collagen. Collagen is great to help with your skin, your nails, your hair, your musculature, your bone density, and your joints. Take it every day. Also take this with the vitamin C and magnesium, and when you drink the filtered water, take the collagen and have that vitamin C. It'll cross-link and help improve your dermal layer, so you'll get additional improvements on your skin when you take the collagen. Now, in terms of joint health, collagen is important to take if you have arthritis or a sports injury. Take it every day, and also do these exercises where you're opening up the joint up to the point of pain and open it up a little bit more, count to about 20 seconds, 30 seconds, rest, and then do the same thing again. Do that 3 times every day. And what you'll be able to do is open up the joint more without pain. Take the collagen every day, and what that's going to do is help remodel the joint. It's going to help to remodel the cartilage and the cushioning of the joint, block the pain, and also block the pain by blocking NaV 1.7 pain gatekeeper. They'll also help to reduce inflammation by inhibiting EP4 and reduce the joint erosion by blocking MMP3 and MMP13. So collagen will help to remodel the joint. I recommend that you take it with the collagen because the collagen has the components you need, the building blocks to remodel that cartilage. The collagen helps to recruit that and also block those enzymes that cause problems. So please follow my advice, get the collagen, and do these exercises. All right, one more video and then we'll wrap it up. Let's see here. Now let's see. I don't know. It's too long. That's 2 hours. Let's see. U.S. military marks historic first in operations against Iran. That was the boat issue. Just in 13. All right, this is Fox News about the 13 hit.
I am addicted to this electrical engineering game. I downloaded it out of curiosity. Now I keep coming back to understand how things work.
The Iranians also carrying out attacks on America's Gulf allies as the regime threatens to carry out a full-scale offensive.
Lucas Tomlinson is live in Tel Aviv with the details. Hey, Lucas.
Well, good morning, guys. The Pentagon says 13 U.S. troops, 10 soldiers, and 3 sailors have been wounded in action this week at various bases in the Middle East, likely from Iran's continued attacks in Bahrain, Kuwait, and Jordan, particularly a large attack on that base in Jordan, housing hundreds of U.S. troops and fighter jets. Now, the U.S. military has been fighting hard the last few nights, including a number of strikes around the Strait of Hormuz, trying to get more shipping through that critical waterway. Here's the former commander of the U.S. Navy's Fifth Fleet.
I think what we're in the process of doing is making it impossible for the regime to control the Strait of Hormuz from that same landmass, from the islands, from the littoral area that borders the strait itself, and then further inland where the roads and bridges and railroads are at, their ability to move supplies not only around the country, but into and out of the country.
U.S. airstrikes began on Iran on July 7th when President Trump was in Ankara, Turkey at the NATO summit, and when Iran hit those 3 oil tankers in the Strait of Hormuz, bringing an end to the ceasefire. Since then, U.S. Air Force F-35s, F-16s, F-15s, and Navy Super Hornets and their version of the F-35 stealth fighter jet have been the vanguard of the response, dropping 2,000-pound satellite-guided bombs and standoff missiles, destroying bridges recently around Bandar Abbas in recent days, Iran's largest naval and commercial port on the Strait of Hormuz. Now, shipping traffic has slowed to a trickle in this strait in recent days. To highlight how dangerous it is right now to sail through there, guys, U.S. warships have not attempted to transit the Strait of Hormuz in more than 2 months. U.S. naval blockade has returned this week. An Iranian advisor, the supreme leader we've not seen or heard from since his father and most of his family were killed on the first night of the war, warned, quote, if U.S. strikes continue for several more days, we will move into a phase of full-scale offensive operations. So we can expect more airstrikes from the U.S. military. There has also been at least 3 medevac flights carrying wounded soldiers in the Middle East, guys.
Thank you, Lucas. Let me ask you a kind of a really big picture question. You know, we all remember a couple of months ago when all of this began, you and Trey were right there where you are right now in Tel Aviv, and there were constant missiles coming in. What does it tell us about the current capabilities of Iran that you're able to stand there in Tel Aviv and give that report and not have incoming missiles?
It's a good point, Charlie. It's been months since Iran launched any attacks on Israel. In fact, you have to go all the way back to early June. Now, it has been noisier in northern Israel from Hezbollah, but the last rocket attacks into northern Israel was back on July 2nd. So it's been, knock on wood, relatively calm in Israel in recent weeks and recent months when you talk about the war against Iran. But as I just mentioned off the top, 13 U.S. troops wounded this week at various bases in the Middle East. What Iran is concentrating now on are those bases in Jordan, Bahrain, and Kuwait primarily.
Just to kind of piggyback off of that, Lucas, it feels like this is a regime, obviously, that cannot be trusted. The way that we've seen the back and forth with these negotiations is a lot of that just bluster. They say they're going on the offensive, but to Charlie's point, if we're not seeing a lot of that activity, is that very realistic at this point?
The problem, Laura, is that you're dealing with three different governments inside Iran. And some would say it's not even a theocracy anymore. It's more of a military junta. The IRGC, those generals have taken over the country. They're heavily involved in the business of Iran. Half the oil is owned by the IRGC. It's almost like dealing with the mafia. They've shown in recent days and weeks they don't want to give that up. And despite the best efforts from the U.S. military to open the Strait of Hormuz, we've really seen that shipping traffic slow down to a trickle. Not many ships going in and out, and certainly none in recent days using the Omani, that southern route. So it's very difficult. We've also seen from Iran that their magazines are a lot deeper than we expected perhaps just a few months ago. And we heard reports that 80-90% of their stockpile had been decreased. They continue to launch drones. In fact, just the other day in Kuwait, they launched 33 drones at that country. So U.S. military has its work cut out for them.
Yeah, you're right. It sounds very clear that the head of the IRGC, Ahmad Bahidi, is not showing any signs, even being so hampered and destroyed militarily, that he's going to stop anytime soon. We'll continue to follow it. Lucas Tomlinson, great report. Thank you. Thanks.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.
Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. Get the Boomer Boost. This is your multivitamin, but it also gives you minerals and other supplements that you need to slow down the aging process. It targets a multitude of systems. It helps your immune system, your endocrine system, brain function, musculature, your metabolism. It'll provide a steady burn of energy throughout the whole day with no spiking. Soak up free radicals, bring down inflammation. It's a great supplement to take every day, and I highly recommend taking it. Now, if you want to do the protocol that I do, take the Boomer Boost, the Max 35, the C60, the turmeric, ashwagandha, and lignans, and the probiotics together, and by doing that, you're slowing down the aging process. Do that every day, every day. And if you want to add stuff to it, like I do, you're adding in the magnesium and zinc and the vitamin C and the omega-3 and the resveratrol. There's lots of ways to customize the clarity factor, but this should be in your protocol every day. It's very powerful and it works, and it helps to slow down the aging process. And you're targeting all these different systems. And you get that steady burn of energy, and you can stack it also with the heirloom barley or the gladiator barley. It's a great way to also control your blood glucose levels. Now, I was talking about C60. C60, you can get in MCT coconut oil, avocado oil, or extra virgin olive oil. C60 needs to be in oil for proper absorption, preferably on an empty stomach in the morning. Take a teaspoon a day every day. This is something that I've been doing for over 10 years every day. Now, what this will do is soak up free radicals about 1,000 times stronger than vitamin C. And it's going to help the health of the mitochondria, so you're going to have more energy, more ATP, which is really important to slow down the aging process. You're bringing down inflammation and bringing down stress in the tissues, so the tissues will perform better. They'll help with your immune system and endocrine system, help the health of your neurons, and also reduce the concentration of oxidized LDL. When you do that, you're reducing plaque formation, so your cardiovascular health will improve. In addition, C60 helps the basal layer of your skin, so your skin will improve. It stacks really well with resveratrol for that very purpose of helping the basal layer. So you will notice that you look younger, and you will be younger biologically, because by bringing down stress, by bringing down inflammation and soaking up free radicals, you're allowing your tissues to perform better, and has less stress causing the aging process, such as shorter telomeres and the over-methylization of genes. Because a big part of aging is your genes that were expressed when you were in your youth are now going through a methylization process, leading to less expression. Well, we want to slow that down. We want to reverse that. And it can be done if you follow my protocol. It's really simple. Bring down inflammation, soak up free radicals, boost up energy levels. Please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com, and get the C60. You can get it in a 2-ounce, a 4-ounce, or an 8-ounce configuration, but it's something that you should be taking every day. And you will also notice some other benefits, such as being able to concentrate better. You'll have more energy. So please go to my store, the-studio-reykjavik.com. That's the end of my broadcast. Thank you for listening. Share the links, ask your social media to follow me, and get the great products that I offer to help to improve your health. And watch my shows. I will tell you what to do in the market in real time in terms of longing and shorting certain assets. Thank you for listening and have a nice day.